Welcome to the Marketplace Midland podcast, where we highlight a monthly speaker that shares helpful tools for all of us to integrate timeless biblical principles into our modern business.
I want to introduce not just a friend, but a brother. And his name's Sam Sledge. You guys read his bio. You know, you guys are in the biz. You want to come listen to the second most attractive man in Midland, according to the mayor, at least. Sam's my stunt double in life, and he's a fellow warrior in the kingdom of God. And let me tell you guys something about this guy. You can read his bio. You can see that he was a baller back in the day for John Parchman and the Lee Rebels at the time, now Legacy. You can see that he excelled on the gridiron at Baylor University. He excelled in the classroom at Baylor University. You can see that he's a, multi-generation oil guy. That's all well and good. But let me tell you what Sam really is. Sam's a dangerous disciple maker. And the whole reason that we show up here month in and month out is to equip and resource and train you guys and hopefully give you a vision to go do the same dadgum thing. Because it is our mission. Not just Marketplace Midland's mission, men. It is the mission that we've been given by the King of Glory himself. Go and make disciples of all nations. Or if you want to read it in the Greek the right way, as you are going in the marketplace, on the gridiron, in the locker room, over coffee, at your house, while you're coaching kids, make disciples of all nations. You baptize them, you introduce them to Jesus, you teach them to obey everything He commanded you, and then you turn them loose to do the same dadgum thing. This guy does it in his house. This guy's done it in the locker room. This guy's done it on the football field. This guy does it at Pro Petro day in and day out. And you know what? He doesn't do it perfectly, but he shows up. And he puts in the work because he's a grinder. Because that's who we are out here, men. We're gritty West Texas dudes. Some of us have better haircuts than the other. But we're grinders. And my challenge to you as you listen to Sam today is that you learn how to be a grinder for the kingdom of God. Because it's the only thing that matters. So you guys give a really hearty Permian Basin welcome to my good friend and brother in Christ, Sam Sledge.
Yeah. Man. I'm dangerous. Did you hear that? I'm dangerous. My goodness, if you ever, in a totally different way. Okay, we had a little snafu with AV today, but we're adapting. We're going to overcome. I've got some pictures to show. That's why I was adamant about getting a screen up here in front of you. So, if you ever get a chance to speak to anything, hire Jared Blong to come introduce you. Where'd you go, Jared? There you are. Yeah, I got to make sure I keep an eye on you. You're dangerous too. And yes, we do resemble each other. My mom pinched you or grabbed you on the butt in the church lobby one morning because she thought it was me. And these aren't the only two examples, but that happened to him. And then I think, in the same year or so, in public, like at a coffee shop or something, his daughter came up and bear hugged me from behind because she thought I was him. So we are two of the better looking gentlemen in Midland, Texas. I have to agree. My wife, Helen, also agrees, except she flips the order. But only one of us can be the first gentleman of Midland, Texas. That's you, Jared. Good job. Okay. First of all, it's a huge honor to be here. I was a regular attender of all of these meetings back when they started. I can remember being in the basement, listening to Tim Dunn speak. Took a little break like a bunch of us did from a lot of things like this after COVID. I came back to hear Andy speak in January. And of course, my first meeting back right after I'd agreed to come do this, they'd show a highlight reel of like all these famous people that have spoken at Marketplace Midland, right when I'm starting to wrap my head around, well, what am I going to say to this room full of people? So, Tim Dunn, Travis Stice, like all kinds of authors, fighter pilots, rodeo guys. I mean, it's been quite the impressive run of people that y'all have had up here. And I'm just honored to be a part of that. Although that was a bit intimidating. So I don't know if y'all did that on purpose. Here, let's see how we're going to do these slides. If I was standing here giving you a presentation about the business I represent, ProPetro, I'd start with a slide that said forward-looking statements and legal disclaimer, and it'd be full of font like this big that you couldn't read from where you were sitting. But it'd basically say, be careful with this information that I'm about to give you. It might change in the future. And my views and the company's views might change as well. So naturally, as a public company CEO, which is just one of the smaller roles I play on day to day, I have to start off with, I'm like Jared said, I'm dangerous. I'm dangerous up here. I don't have it all figured out, I promise. Even if I act like I sometimes do. My dad was making fun of me while we were getting started a minute ago that, about how smart I think I am. But I don't have it all figured out. That said, I'm constantly trying to figure it all out. Maybe if I can relate to that dangerous word, I think I'm a dangerous learner. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. Selfishly, as I think about coming up here to speak with y'all, I look back on maybe the last month or so as I've tried to prepare my mind and my soul to share my story and to tell you a little bit more about what I'm about. If you exercise your freedom to choose, which we'll talk about a little bit here in a minute, when you agree to do something like this, it can be quite transformational on you. I had a mentor of mine tell me years and years ago, whether it's at the coffee shop with one person or whether it's in a room full of people like this, find a way to tell your story. Find a way to tell your story, not so much as to influence the masses, but so as to organize your thoughts and reflect on the journey that you've been on and how God works in your life. So I've been on a journey for the last month, and it's almost like everything that's been happening in front of me has been making me think of this moment and how it all translates to what I'll share with you today. And at the end of the day, this is kind of at the top of my personal constitution, I'm a broken sinner that's been born again as a follower of Jesus Christ that is designed, called, and gifted to be a learner, a teacher, and a leader that is pushing others to be more than they think they can be. So I'm going to give you a brief testimonial. I'm going to use some hopefully some funny pictures to tell you a little bit about how I've grown up and who I am. And then I want to shift into kind of how I view values and these lenses and goggles that you carry around and how you look at life and everything that the world throws at you and what's top of mind for me as it pertains to those things. But at the end, I'm going to finish with some questions that have been heavy on me recently. Maybe you can connect with some of those. And I know we have some table discussion questions, but I'd love to, if y'all are interested, to engage in a dialogue with the entire room and just kind of take Q&A. Nothing's off limits. I've got nothing to hide from. And I'm happy to share about my journey and my views on some of these things, even if I don't have them all figured out. Okay, where did it all start? That's what it's all about right there. Those are my people. I believe, and it is my experience, that the nuclear Christian family is the greatest governing mechanism on this earth. I'm evidence of it. My mom, my dad, my sister Shelley, they are the reason why I am who I am today, why I do what I do today. Loved me and supported me and still do. This is quite literally what it's all about. Look at that handsome fella, Jared. We might need to compare childhood photos someday. Maybe we're related. I kind of wanted to use these visuals as things that I think were instrumental and transformational in my life as I was growing up. You got me on the left. I think that was the first football team I was ever on in 5th grade, which football competition team sports in general became a huge part of molding my views, making my friends, and I think that's pretty straightforward. The other thing you see on this page is the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I know there's several of you that in this room that are very familiar with that organization. I gave my life to Christ at an FCA huddle in 9th grade, 14 years old, Lee Youth Center. And I did that because there were disciples out there like Ken Marks and Eric Boyd that would just show up at football practices and hug people. I'm like, who is this old guy hugging me? Some of y'all might know Ken. Rest in peace, Ken, after 90 plus years of discipleship. As I already told you, I had a lot of love at home. Who is this old man hugging on me and inviting me to come eat free pizza at the youth center? Okay, fine. I've been hugged one too many times. I guess I'll show up and hear what Fellowship of Christian Athletes is all about. That's when I discovered church. I grew up in this church, First Baptist, right down the hallway, Sunday school every Sunday. But I don't think what church really was ever really sunk in and hit me until I found this church. Connecting these things that I love so much, sports and God, was where it all kind of started to become real to me. I think before that, I would come to church on Sundays and do the study and read the verses and go to big church every now and then, and none of it really sunk in. I think this is where, at the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, like I said, the Lee Youth Center in 9th grade is where my church and spiritual journey really, really kicked off. And maybe partially because of that, and maybe for some other reasons, that made high school kind of a lonely time for me in a few different ways. Was not the most popular guy at school. I can teeter on nerdy in a lot of ways, and was just making choices that were different than a lot of my, high school friends were making at the time, which in turn made high school for me a very small circle. I mean, in terms of the guys that I was doing life with in high school, it was about this many. And I could say, intentionally I did that because of, my spiritual journey and things like that. But really, looking back on it and reflecting it, I think I loved football so much. And I was so interested in what the next phase of my life looked like that those other things that happened in high school just became disinteresting to me. And I don't really think it was much more complicated than that. I don't think I can take a ton of credit for that. So you move forward from there to what was not a very lonely time in my life, maybe literally the funnest years of my life, maybe other than what I'm going through right now with these two little kids, was when I went to play football and attend school at Baylor in Waco. And I thought this was a fun picture to share because, if your friends jumped off a cliff, would you do it too? Yeah, I did it. With the right people? Yeah, I think we should all consider that. Under kind of the right conditions and with the right people. And this is just kind of one of my funnest visual memories of what college was to me, with some of my best friends driving down to Lake Whitney at the state park and jumping off a cliff because that's all we needed to have fun. Met my best friends in the world at Baylor. Got to play some football, which is, I had to walk onto the football team. Was first team All-State, All-District, all everything in high school, and couldn't get really a Division I school to give me a sniff at all. So I kind of made it a point to myself, well, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to go to school where I want to go to school and study what I want to study, and this football thing's going to work because I'm going to make it work. And that's exactly what I did. That will come into some things we talk about later. So walked on, met some of my greatest friends, continued my journey with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at Baylor. Like I said, that was my church. I might have gone into a real church 10 times in, 5 or 6 years in Waco, but there wasn't ever a time when FCA was huddling up that I wasn't there with some of my closest friends. Jared touched on my football journey. I've already touched on it a few different times. If you count high school and college, I played 6 different positions in 8 years. I just never knew where to go, but I knew how to raise my hand and say, I'll do that. You need me over here, I'll do those things. And this is definitely going to connect to some of my values here as we get into that. And my goodness, I already talked about my friends, but coaches and professors at that school, huge. I could name a ton of them. So then, that happened. Yeah, I told her I was going to embarrass her. Married my now wife, Helen, who's sitting right over there on the side of the room. Easily the best decision I've ever made, bar none. I get the chance to speak to large intern classes at ProPetro every summer, and I like to always see the dumbfounded looks on their faces when I tell them, quit asking me questions about how to get a job and ask me more questions about how to find your life teammate, because that's going to be a way bigger deal than where your first job is. Definitely was the case for me. I like to think of us as a team, whether Helen likes it or not sometimes, and I love to refer to her as the head coach and me the star player. Then that happened in there. This isn't perfectly chronological, but I joined a little tiny growing company called ProPetro in 2011. I quite literally walked to the stage to receive my master's in business degree, and 10 days later, tried to figure out how to shift gears on an 18-wheeler. And on that same day, tried to figure out how to make wellhead connections on a frac site. And I did that because I had a lot of people that had gone before me, knowing what I was interested in doing maybe with my early career, speak into me and say, start at the wellhead. If you want to be in this business, the services business, you've got to start at the wellhead. You can work your way out from there, and maybe at your own speed. A big reason why I chose ProPetro over a Halliburton or a Schlumberger is because I knew they would let me go at my speed and not schedule every minute of every day for me. And my first day on the job, I started at the wellhead. Here's a hammer. Here's some high pressure iron. Here's how you put it on. Go to work. Kind of a short, brief way to tell my journey at ProPetro, which is quite a long one. I could give you a whole nother presentation on. I held in my first 7 years, this was 2011. This is probably that picture may be taken 2012. I spent about 2 years dressed like that and doing everything from learning how to drive a truck to operate equipment, maintenance equipment, chemistry and fluids on frac job, just everything. Then almost held a different role every year for about 7 years straight. You think about kind of my football career, playing all those different positions. Wouldn't you imagine the exact same thing happens to me when I start my business career? And it wasn't because I designed it that way. I'm going to go learn all these different things. It was just that I just continue to find myself, where's the challenge? Where's the next thing to learn? And how am I going to learn it? So in a growing company, when all these new things need to be done, young guys like me raise their hand and say, let me give them a try, and you usually get what you ask for. I wasn't the only one doing that. There's still a good number of us at the company today that were doing all those same things, and all of us are leading at a much higher level now. But just an example of my career. So in the last 5 years, my leadership at ProPetro has elevated significantly. I've now been the CEO for 3.5 years, which, looking back, if you include my business and my football careers, the longest I've held any one single position. And I feel like I'm still trying to figure out how that works. Within that ProPetro journey, and after I married that pretty lady that I showed you, that happened. And Those are our two sons, Silas and John David. My wife has successfully brainwashed them to like Midland High, but don't worry, I'll show you later. I've successfully brainwashed them about Baylor, which is much more important. Let's see, what other notes do I have on this? Check out those dudes. Everybody thinks their kids are the best looking and the coolest, but mine actually are. That said, I don't know, we had a pretty good argument over homework last night, so maybe they're a little tough sometimes too. Living life with these little guys is the absolute best. They do make us, and especially Helen, tired, but they are teaching us stuff every day about ourselves. And I can tell you the first thing that both of these little guys have taught me is how selfish I am. And I think the journey as a parent is one of the best journeys I've been on thus far. I told you, I brainwashed them Baylor. There they are. My wife went to TCU, so that's a big deal. We're Midland High and Lee and TCU and Baylor. So that's important. So look, lately for me, these are some more recent pictures. Learning how to do my job as a CEO, as a large organization, being a teacher and a father to two young men. Finding some time and energy along the way to love and care for my wife the right way. And also, maybe I haven't really mentioned it much, but allowing my closest friends and my most fruitful relationships to rub off on me and to make me better. Now, that might sound all cool and good. I saw some smiles from the crowd. That was all fun to talk about. My journey has not been without the hard stuff. But I want to save that for something a little bit later. Okay, now let's shift kind of from the testimony. How are we doing on time? All right, we're doing good. To kind of how I've been working through life lately. Some of you might find this simple equation familiar. Viktor Frankl, Stephen Covey, this idea of the world in the form of stimulus is coming at us all the time. You can't stop it. It'll keep coming. Right now, it's coming at you. If you're looking at me and watching me and listening to me, that's all stimulus coming through your brain. You respond to stimulus all the time. Even if you think you're not responding, by not responding, you're responding to that stimulus. You know, hot water, get out of it. That person said something mean to me. Am I going to respond and say something mean back, or am I going to turn around and not respond? Those are all choices that we make. This red arrow kind of represents the fact that many of us, and I'd say in most time we spend, we move from stimulus straight to response without even knowing it. Almost like autopilot. You hop on the plane and the sucker just flies, right? I think it's important to always remind ourselves that we don't have to let it be that way. We don't have to let our response to ongoing stimulus be automatic. We do have a freedom to choose. These are some of those Viktor Frankl quotes. One of the more famous Holocaust survivors, psychologist, and he's, I think in the modern day, done the best job at explaining what I'm kind of describing to you here today. Romans 12:2 also says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Okay, so to put all that in my own words, as all this stimulus is coming at you on a daily basis, you get to choose. Do you want to live and make your home in a place I call Comparisonville? Or do you want to live in a place that I call the biggest room in the world, which is the room for improvement? Guess who the head coach and the man in charge of the room for improvement is? It's Jesus, because he constantly wants us to be the best we can be, not to compare ourselves to others. And just to connect on the Comparisonville part, because I would guess it's pretty straightforward that the room for improvement, that means that we spend more of our time trying to be everything we can be and less of our time comparing ourselves to others. But let me give you a couple different examples of what it could look like in your day-to-day to compare yourself to others. Man, see that new car that guy got? That's nice. I wish I had a car like that. Man, did you hear that? Did you hear about that deal that company did? Gosh, could have been us if we would have just done this and that other thing. We could go on and on. Those are pretty easy examples to think of, but let me give you maybe a little bit more difficult one to think of, but is definitely living in Comparisonville, and that is, man, did you see that guy over there, what he did? What an idiot. Why would he ever do that? In your mind, you're thinking, I'm so much smarter than that idiot guy over there and that thing he did. But really all you're doing is comparing yourself to that person. Y'all get it? Following me? All right. So this is, I think, this and the next slide will be what I think are the highest iterations of exercising your freedom to choose. Not just saying, oh, I get a choice, but how do I want to make that choice? And what do I want to stick in this equation as a reminder on an ongoing basis to help me live, or at least have my car driving in the direction of the biggest room in the world and not Comparisonville? And one, it's figuring out what you're all about. That's a whole, probably another speech and journey all on its own. And you got to slide those things in there. And I'm going to talk about what some of those things are for me. I think it would make perfect sense to say, okay, I'll just let my values come into play after the world comes at me. But my favorite way to look at it is almost wearing it as armor everywhere you go. Thinking about it almost as like a pair of goggles or glasses. That stimulus can't even get to me if it's not going through the filter I've made for myself yet. And then it makes the rest of this equation pretty easy because you're already starting ahead. The other iteration of this is, think of it as that equation almost sitting on a plate that is made of relationships. It's just going to wither and fall away if your circle of influence isn't built appropriately. And that's a two-way street. That's a two-way street. It is, how am I influencing the people around me through working through this equation? And how are people around me influencing me? Pretty important. Yeah, I guess the note I left to myself is here, we don't live in caves and holes. We're called by God to live in community. And that kind of community, do we let it influence us, and how do we want to influence others? So I'll share just a few of mine. There, we got 3 or 4 of my values that I like to slide into that equation, or that I like to walk around with these lenses on my goggles every day. Curiosity. Quit waiting around for answers and go discover them. I think the best answers are found through pursuing the best questions. Be more curious and interested in timeless and permanent things rather than temporary things. Temporary things like the news cycle. Permanent things like the Bible and other pieces of literature that seem to be timeless. I've been grinding my way through a chronological history Bible reading plan. And interestingly enough, of course, well, you get stuck there for a long time if you do that in the Old Testament. My goodness, it's a slog. For those of you that read through the Old Testament, you can laugh and smile at that because it is. It's hard. But what's been interesting to me has been reading through some of this Old Testament stuff while I'm watching what's going on in the rest of the world. None of this is new, right? So what I mean by permanent and everlasting information or temporary information is that the news cycle of the day is temporary and it will fade. But the lessons inside of that are permanent and forever and are, quite frankly, almost written the same way in the oldest book that's ever been written. Matthew 7:7, keep on asking and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on searching and you will find. Keep on knocking, and the door will be open to you. That's what I think curiosity means to me, not just sitting back and consuming, but searching and discovering. Range. From Talladega to the New York Opera. I've not been to the New York Opera yet. Maybe me and Helen will go someday, but I've been to Talladega Motor Speedway, and it's awesome. I think I wore a pair of cut-off jeans, went with some of those guys I was jumping off that cliff with. But what I mean by range here is basically anti-specialization. And for me, in my current career today, that's from the well site to the corner office, is finding a way to connect every point along the way. And also remembering that most of us walk around thinking a whole lot more about ourselves than we do thinking about the people that we're around. So, that'd be really uncomfortable for me to go to Talladega or to the New York Opera. Well, don't worry about it, because everybody's just walking around thinking about themselves anyways. And they look like people, but what they are souls, right? So whether you're going to witness directly to people or whether you're just going to observe life and souls in their current state, I think being able to stretch yourself over a broad sample of things is extremely important. Let's see, I wrote it this way. Be able to connect, enjoy, influence, and learn everywhere you are. And don't be afraid to try new things because the opposite is boring and it doesn't help you grow. Colossians 3:23, this might be my all-time favorite Bible verse. Work willingly at whatever you do as working for the Lord and not for man. Like I said, inside of this range deal, it's souls, not people. We're not working for those people. We're working for the kingdom. Fitness. Be hard to kill. That doesn't mean have a six-pack and only eat leaves and things like that. It means use your body, your mind, and your spirit to be as useful as possible. And it looks different for all of us. Right now, there was a day back in my football days where I was a pretty big, strong, put-together dude. I'm not that anymore. Some days, fitness for me is praying while I'm on a walk, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. You just got to do it. I also like to think of fitness, and this is mind, body, and spirit, on a continuum where you have sickness and death on one end, and you have perfect fitness on the other end. The idea is to keep moving in that direction of perfect fitness. And every step you take that way is a hedge against sickness and death. So when life throws you the hard stuff, which is the next slide, you'll be better positioned to handle those hard things. The further you slide along that continuum, the more destructive those hard things will be. 1 Corinthians 6, 19-20. Don't you realize that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price. So you must honor God with your body. All right, last one. The hard stuff. It's going to keep coming, so keep your pads low. And any of you football guys know what keeping your pads low means. If you're going to come around the corner on the football field, standing straight up, if you run into something hard, you're going down. So keep your pads low. This is kind of how I think about that. You break the huddle, you get in your stance. Doing that is like organizing your days intentionally so you can keep your mind, body, and soul ready for what lies ahead. Okay, you've broken the huddle, you've gotten in your stance, now you got to get ready to come off the ball and keep your pads low. In the world, that looks like the opponent in the world is unpredictable, so position yourself accordingly. You will fail, you will get knocked down. Go revisit the game film, get coached up, hit the weight room, rest, and get ready to play the next game better than you played the last. I've got a list of hard things. I just made this morning, jotted this down. In no particular order, I left this stuff out of my testimonial, but this might be the most important page, the most important thing that I did as I reflected on preparing to talk to you today. Like I said, in no particular order. Learning how to work 100 hours a week at the well site, hard. Changing roles constantly, downturns, COVID, layoffs. Death and disease in my family, 7 deaths in the last 7 years, one of which was my mom. Walking on and earning a Division I scholarship. Sitting on the front row and helping guide and lead people through a SEC and internal investigation. Having 2 kids in 2 years, that was hard. Massive leadership turnover at my company, hard. Questioning and doubting myself through some of the hardest times of my career, hard. A fresh new hard thing. One of my best friends is currently in Houston at MD Anderson fighting leukemia. Recently, ProPetro had an accidental death on location. Hard. In and around that, I went to 3 funerals in 5 days. That sucked. Not being able to pick up the phone and call my mom. Hard. Trying to keep my dad propped up after we lost my mom. Tough. Small talk. Hate it. Hard. My sister and brother-in-law having miscarriages and now raising a very developmentally delayed daughter. My mother-in-law having a stroke while overseas on a mission trip, leaving her in a coma for weeks. Now fighting loss of vision and certain cognitive functions, hard. Going from what Helen and I had was all the help in the world with our kids, the envy of all of our friends, to watching both of our dads be caretakers. Hard. Like I mentioned earlier, arguing with our kids about homework, also very hard. All the meanwhile, trying to devote myself to my family, my closest friends, while leading a 2,000-person organization in what I think is one of the hardest industries to lead in. I'm missing a lot of other things, and I could quite frankly give you a presentation on all of those that I just read. What I hope you're not doing is listening to that and saying, that young kid, he doesn't know what's coming. Life's only going to get harder. Don't live in Comparisonville. Quit it. Or you're thinking, ooh, my life's pretty easy compared to Sam's. Don't do that either. God made us different and made our journeys different for a reason. He didn't make us to compare ourselves to each other. So what about all this hard stuff? That's my mom. And I thought I'd try and wrap this up by encouraging everybody to find meaning in the hard stuff. This has been the hardest of all for me. But as I look back on that, I say, where is the meaning in this? Look at the game film. Look at the hard stuff that happens. What can I learn? Where can I get better? And for me, what that hard thing has been a call to live more like her. And I just wrote this morning, but to lean into adventure and fun more. And remember that it's not that everything will be good, it's that it already is good. So go live in faith and confidence. And I think I could hear my mom say this to me right now. Do more fun stuff with your kids. And that's what it all boils down to for me, is this opportunity that we have to influence. God didn't call us to sit and stare in a corner or live in a cave. He called us for a life of witness and spreading the good news. So maybe you don't want to come up here and get on a stage and do what I'm doing right now. But what I can tell you, you do have the opportunity to do through your freedom to choose, like we talked about earlier, is to influence yourself first. And ask yourself some hard questions about how you're spending your time. And what am I allowing to influence me? And am I aware of what's influencing me? Because we are all leaders. You might be a sole contributor in your business. You might not have a wife and kids yet. You're leading yourself. You will have the opportunity to lead others because God will put those things in front of you. It'll look different than me. Like I said, don't compare stories. Just prepare yourself for the moment. These are some of the questions that have been heavy on me recently. And like I said earlier, my hope is to engage y'all in a conversation maybe out here in the open a little bit about some of this stuff. Am I stuck in my own head, or am I instead moving towards action and influence? When does my autopilot fly me to Comparisonville? What lenses am I choosing to view the world's stimulus? Am I focused on the signal or the noise? Am I judging things that aren't asked to being judged? That's my favorite question lately. Am I keeping inventory of and reflecting on my hard stuff? One of my mentors several years ago, a man that's actually spoken to y'all in front of this room, gave me a big chief tablet. And he said, put this on your desk and just write the hard stuff in it. And I don't write in it every day, but it sits on my desk, and every now and then I flip it open and I just write whatever's hard that day. Some days it's one thing, some days it's 10 things. And the fun thing is to go back and look through that. And that's what I mean by keeping an inventory. How can we create meaning from these hard things if we're not recording them and inspecting them and reflecting on them? And lastly, what relationships need pruning and which one need more investment? Like I said, that whole equation, it sits on the plate that is your circle of influence and the people that you surround yourself with every day. I'm not sure there's much more important than that. All right, that's all I had prepared for y'all. I'm happy to take questions. Jared, Jeff, all of y'all. If that was all too scary, then we can go to small table discussions. Whatever y'all want to do. We are currently all residing in the biggest room in the world where everyone is welcome, including me.
Sam, what was the best thing your mother gave you?
Oh my gosh. Confidence. You know, naturally, and I'm watching this happen with my wife and kids right now. Not always the case, but in many or most cases, these little kiddos, they spend a lot more time with their mom than their dad. You know, I swoop in from work last night, and we've got an argument going on over homework, and I started a laughing wrestling match that I in turn got in trouble for. It was fun though. I was proving to my 100-pound second grader that I could hold him down with 3 fingers. He's a big guy. So I can't say that my dad that's sitting over there didn't participate in this as well, because he did heavily. But confidence is the first thing I think of. And to think of, you know, we're joking about being dangerous earlier. Jared called me dangerous and I joked about it. I am, because of that confidence. Enough confidence in the right way where even if I don't have something figured out, I believe in myself enough to go pursue it and dive into it. Now, I think there's several of y'all in this room, a lot of y'all in this room that knew my mom, and I think you would probably see that in her. If she wheeled in here right now, she'd be the most confident person in the room, and she'd make others around her feel that way.
How did the Lord Or what are some ways, the hard times you went through, how the Lord carried you, what He did, just some things.
Yeah, Glenn, the first thing I think of, and I know Glenn's been through some of this hard stuff lately too. For me, Glenn, it's my community. It's my family first, and the next layer of defense is my close friends. And that's maybe ties to that fitness value that I have, and that idea of, every step you're taking in the right direction is a hedge against being pushed in the wrong direction. And my goodness, if you can find a way to invest in the right relationships and prune the wrong ones, that's how God carried me. And it's not a lot of friends. It's not. I'm generally an introvert. I can channel it to do something like this, but I'm going to have to go sit in a dark room this afternoon because the cup's going to be empty. But I think it's specifically to my mom. It's just 5 or 6 guys that didn't let me get down, and they still don't. So, and they're all godly men. And I wouldn't be investing in those relationships if they weren't. And I think on top of that, and maybe wraps all of this, is just, what's in that good book is true. Right? Doesn't mean that doubt won't creep in every now and then. But that's true. And my uncle, who lost his wife, my aunt, a few years before my mom passed away, reminded me, as my mom was, I think, in her final days and in really bad shape. ALS is one of the most physically terrible diseases. If you've never been close to it, I hope you don't have to be. And he reminded me and our family, why do we fight our tails off to stay on this earth when what's on the other side is infinitely better? And you kind of think about that and you go, man, if I think about that the right way, I should be jealous. And I would put my uncle in that circle of influence, right? And he was definitely front row, having been through some loss himself just a couple years before us, helping and loving us through all of that. So when I think of that, Glenn, God provided support through other people. Still does.
Sam, thanks so much for your testimony today and your courage to share what you did. I think I speak for a lot of people here that was very impactful and also very fruitful, so thank you. My question to you is, I recently made a decision when my wife moved back to West Texas. We live in Austin. We're actually getting induced tonight with my daughter being born.
First kid?
First kid.
Oh, you're about to find out how selfish you are.
I think I already have. Figured it out. Thank you. So I mentioned that because I think a big reason that we decided that was because, like you, I grew up in West Odessa with similar people in my childhood like you did, and I want that for my daughter. So my question to you is, what else can the community do to make sure that we create this type of environment like you were so lucky, I was so lucky to be for, especially as the city grows? What would you like to see us as a community do, provide, and what can we do to foster that?
I think you got to be involved, and we all have busy jobs, stuff going on. You got to be involved first in your family, right? I mean, my dad worked a ton, family business. Felt like I was always with my mom, but I never doubted that anybody cared or was interested in what I was doing. And I think everything radiates out from there. If you're involved with your new daughter, which I hope everything goes great, you will then in turn be involved with her school. And then you'll be involved with the teams that she might be on. She should be on a team, by the way, whatever team it is. And then I think that's what pulls you in. That's what, many of you heard my wife and I get really outspoken about something like the school ball in the last couple of years. We've got skin in the game now. So we wanted to understand what we're battling and what we're fighting. So involvement in our kids' lives then creates that community involvement. That's why I make that statement that I think the nuclear family, the nuclear Christian family is the greatest social mechanism ever created. So I think if you're like investing in that and paying attention to your kids, everything's going to radiate out from there because you're going to care about where they are and what they're doing. I watched my parents be presidents of booster clubs and all this type of stuff when I was growing up. It's because they cared about me. That's what I thought. And that helped them love all these other people in the community.
One of the things you mentioned was being a dangerous learner. Can you kind of share a little bit about what that process is for you? Kind of the second part to that, I imagine, is some reading other than the book. Is there another book that's had a great influence on you?
Yeah, I'm kind of on a little bit of a reading break right now. I'm one of those twisted guys that reads almost exclusively nonfiction. And I don't know if I realized until maybe just the last couple of years how much of a toll that can take on me. And you can kind of really get twisted around the axle in your own mind, going from business book to leadership book to military book to biography. And it's like, oh my gosh, look at what all these people have done and how much can I learn from these things. So I'm kind of on a little bit of maybe a break from that right now. But for me, look, and I think learning is, there's way more time in the day to learn than you think there is. I posed the question to the Marketplace board members on Monday, how much time do you spend in your car every day? And are you filling your ears full of trash, or are you learning while you're driving down the street? And for me, if you see me on the road, I'm either in quiet, letting it all settle out, talking to myself, something like that, or there's a podcast or a book or something being played that I find interest in. I listen to music on my drive to the office for the first time. I can't remember the last time I listened to music in my car, and I don't even really know why I did it, but I felt like I was like on drugs. Because you kind of forget like what that type of stimulus is until you spend a long time away from it. And then you go back to either being quiet in the car or listening to a book in the car, and how much calming that is compared to like what something like music can do to you. And look, that's, again, don't compare yourself to me. You might need something different. But for me, learning is, personally, it's taking advantage of all the micro moments and filling them with an ability to learn or self-discover. On the business side of things, my gosh, and people on my team know this. I've been trying to not be this lately, but I've got a lot of questions. I just don't ever feel like I have enough information. So that at the workplace, that manifests itself in asking a ton of questions. And that kind of goes to overlaps a lot with the range part that I talked about. Is I've got questions in the boardroom and I've got questions on the shop floor. There's always something to learn. So to me, it's just like a all the time thing. And it's kind of tortuous sometimes, and to slow it down and turn it off because you don't ever feel like you have enough. But I think it's part of what makes me good and confident too.
I was interested in the second half of his question. Do you have a specific book?
Oh, thought you might ask.
Repeat the question.
He said, do I have books to recommend? Y'all get up here and take a picture of this. This is kind of some of my recent favorites and some podcasts that I'll kind of cherry pick every now and then. Look, one of my favorite ones, it's at the top of the list. It's a book called Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And she has kind of coined this idea that courage is vulnerability. Getting up here and talking about my mom dying and what that meant to me, that's hard to talk about. I'm trying to work that courage muscle. That's kind of what that book talks about, one of my all-time favorites. Well, lots of business and leadership type of stuff. I don't know, what are you looking for? You looking for anything in particular?
I don't know. What is Shoe Dog?
Shoe Dog is the story of Phil Knight starting Nike. I think it's the best business book ever written. And if you think you might not make it, just read that book. You can make it. Believe me. You can make it. Jared.
Tell us about an influential disciple maker in your life, someone that influenced you, and then a fruitful disciple of yours that you can point to and said, man, they're bearing fruit that's bearing fruit.
Can you repeat that, Sam?
Yeah, he asked, tell me about a disciple maker, someone that discipled me, and someone maybe that I've been fruitfully discipling. I talked about that guy that gave me that Big Chief tablet, who several years ago stood up in front of this room and spoke. His name's Jay Allison. He's one of my dad's college roommates. For no reason other than I think the love he had for my dad, he started after me when I was in college. And that looked a lot of different ways. And I think, I could use the word mentor as it applies to Jay, and I think that's a great example of all the different ways a mentor can work on you and disciple on you. Look, if he almost quite frankly never said another word to me, just his example and knowing that he knows me is really all I need from him going forward. Now, do I get the random text message every now and then that is like a very strong accountability mechanism, like, what are you filling your life with right now? And it'll just come out of nowhere. And sometimes it's a long handwritten letter. And sometimes we don't talk for 6 months. But he came after me when I was a young man and started to help me lay the groundwork of, making good decisions, investing in my spirit. Somebody I've discipled, I think they'll maybe remain unnamed because this is going to be recorded and posted, and I want to respect people's confidentiality, but there's been somebody that I've been working closely with in our business for the last several years that I didn't know if they were a believer, and I never really asked them. But God put those conversations in front of me the last couple of years without me having really to make anybody uncomfortable or solicit it. And he's told me a number of times, I haven't asked you about all this stuff, but I just watch you. And when you lead a company that's as big as ProPetro's, there's people always watching, but when you have somebody say something like that, it kind of hits you in the face. And then the next conversation said, I've been watching you, and here's why I've decided to do this, because you do those things and I see how it helps. And then it's like, whoa, fuel on the fire, let's go. So, does that answer your question? But that I think, Jared, I like that question because that goes back to this leadership equals influence deal. Even if you're not choosing to disciple someone, they're watching.
I got a question for you, Sam. How about like 10 years ago, or you lose an old friend, right? And there's still people watching you. You ever had that one person or that one high school guy or whoever it was come back into your life and say, Sam, you did something for me 10 years ago and it just touched my heart and I never forgot it?
Yeah, I think about those early days starting out at ProPetro when I was working on the well site for a couple of years. And the cool thing about our culture and our business is that almost all those guys are like still with us. And you run into them and you'll get the funny like, oh, I knew you were always meant for the office, man. We knew you were going to the office. It's like, what are you talking about? But they would say things like, they'll say things, they'll hit the guy next to him and say, man, did you know this is our CEO? So, no, I didn't know this was our CEO. He hit himself in the leg with a hammer on location, one of his first days on the job, but he kept going And then he came to help me over here, and he did this thing. And, every now and then, they didn't they? Near miss. But those people come around and then they'll say, man, thanks for being who you are. Thanks for leading like you do. We're behind you. We're grinding. Let's go. So that helps. That helps a ton, on those days that you show up and you're like, gosh, this is hard. What we do is hard. When's the worm going to turn?
That gets you out of your head, that comment you had
Yeah.
earlier,
Yeah.
kind of breaking that monotony.
Yeah, and that's that. I would put that in the circle of influence category, in the range category. So if I'm not too fearful to go put myself in situations on the shop floor, in the yard, on location, for people to even have that conversation with me, that's kind of it's a microcosm of from Talladega to the New York Opera, right? Just go. Just go. Something good's going to be there.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Marketplace Midland Podcast. Please join us next month with speaker Daniel McLaughlin.